Both Marvel and DC have experienced different moments of trying to broaden their line, trying to change out characters for younger versions, trying to change the race or the gender of certain characters. Both companies have done it, but Marvel seems to take a lot more of the heat. Why? Hey, everybody, this is Perch. Why is it that if you look at the complaints, if you look at the trolling, the anger, the whatever it might be, whatever side you fall on this debate, now this is where I'd like for you to look at what I'm about to say. Don't take this as I'm on one side or on the other side. Try and move yourself up to this kind of overview point where you can look at everything and let's assess the situation together. Um, Both Marvel and DC have introduced, DC's introduced new Green Lanterns. DC went for the black Muslim and female two Green Lanterns simultaneously, and they've made changes to Batgirl. They've had a variety of different things come out. You had Batwing. You had all these moments of new characters. Marvel has as well. You've seen certainly Miss Marvel, Kamala Khan. You've seen just various different characters come into the mix. You saw Riri Williams take over for Tony Stark. Both companies have changed the race, gender, sometimes sexuality, although not very often there, of their characters or age. They've younged them down. Is that a word? They've made them young. Whatever. Both companies have done it, but at the same time, if you look at the complaints, the ratio I would say is 90-10 to Marvel. Marvel is the one people get pissed about. And they're the ones with the articles and the videos. And if you look at the videos, actually, you will see, I mean, including the big guys. If you go and you just kind of do an assessment of Richard Meyer's videos, you will see that the big roasts tend to be more on Marvel. Not just 10, they are. I mean, there's definitive correlation there. That doesn't mean, hey, he roasts Tom King and stuff. Sure, absolutely. I'm not saying he doesn't. I'm just saying if you look at the videos, the complaints across everybody, Marvel takes more of the heat. Why? Well, I think it's not just like secret DC sleeper fans who are trying to kind of smear Marvel from the outside, and I don't think it's also that people just hate Disney. Although I think there's an aspect to that where there's a bunch of factors that come into play, and one of those is there's just a kind of anti-corporate mouse feel to everything, and I think that thus they get more scrutiny. But I think the bigger reason, or the biggest reason for all this, is that if you look at Marvel historically and you take out any of kind of the diversity efforts or change comics or relaunches or any of that, you just take all that stuff away. Marvel tends to be a lot more what I would call a flood strategy, where when they get an idea or something works, they will like immediately go overboard. I think the expression I hear in a shop a lot is they blow their wad, which is doesn't sound right, but anyway, uh, Marvel does not know restraint, and they also don't really seem to get timing. So whereas DC will roll these things out, DC tends to, other than the very short lived and panned DCU stuff from a bit ago, DC tends to do this stuff in kind of a measured fashion. They'll change one character here, and then they'll let that go for 6 months or so, and then they'll do something else over here. And they don't do this. Hey, let's create DC Legacy and relaunch all the books all at once, and in the process, change the characters out. Blah blah. They tend to just organize themselves a little bit better. I mean, when Brian Michael Bendis was putting out Riri Williams, they were also simultaneously putting out Amanda's Cho as the Hulk. They were putting out relaunched Miss Marvels. They were putting out all these new characters, New America Chavez. They were going overboard with all the different books, and that it starts to feel to fans like Either I can't escape it if you don't like it, or I think more of the problem, it just starts to feel like there's no organization, there's no coordination. It's like you wake up one month and we're changing everything at once. It's all different. And you can argue that, hey, the new 52 did that. Well, they did. And the suddenness of the new 52 relaunch was to streamline marketing and everything else. But even that got panned at the time in the sense that they kind of pulled the rug out from under fans. And so I would argue that whenever a company does it, whether it's Marvel, it's DC, it's whatever, if you present to your market, to your buying audience, you're doing too much all at once, whatever the too much is, there tends to be a backlash. And I think historically, Marvel, whether it's variant covers or whether it's relaunches or whether it's changing characters or using villains. I mean, one of the things that's always confused me about Marvel is you will have 8 years go by with no Kraven the Hunter anywhere. Nobody uses it. Characters is just not there. And then suddenly, like 5 different titles use the character simultaneously. It's within the course of like 1 to 2 months. Same thing with Dakin or Ultron. There's a handful of these characters. It's like, oh my god, everybody is using them. Nobody's using MODOK. Then suddenly, over 3 months, MODOK is appearing in 5 different books, and it's very. There's just this like you start to wonder who's the editor in chief. Well, we that's Tom Brevoort, but who's controlling this? Like, has anybody got a crazy whiteboard somewhere or a Trello board or something, and they've got the months going by, and you're like, well, okay, over here, Jonathan Hickman wants to use this, and over here, Donnie Cates wants to use this, and Jason Aaron wants to use that. And they're going, hey, Jason Aaron wants to use, the Red Skull and wants to do a redemption arc for the Red Skull. And then the same month, Donnie Cates wants to use the Red Skull and have him blow up Manhattan. And it's like, oh, hey, one of you needs to, do rock, paper, scissors because, we can't use that character both places. The fans will think we're nuts. Like, is anybody doing that job? Because I think that is a job, and it's a job that somebody needs to do, and maybe somebody's getting paid for right now to do. That's what I think Marvel suffers for. And so where I've done videos before around is this whole forced diversity stuff, is it a perception problem? Yeah, I think it by and large is a perception problem, and it's a timing problem. It's a you'll see Marvel pull the trigger on 5 initiatives that are all the same, but they'll pull it over a 2 month span, and then for 2 years will do nothing. And it's like if you spread that out, the market would have accepted it better. You probably would have gotten some good data from the early releases that you did that may have caused you to change your strategy or do things differently in the other releases. There's a lot of elements where it's like the planning is creating problems, or maybe better put, the lack of planning is creating problems. And I think that's why you see Marvel at the root of it. I think that's why you see Marvel get the heat they did. I also, like I said, there's a lot of other elements. I think just them being owned by Disney is a factor. I think their PR and their approach to criticism has often been very thin-skinned, where somebody will criticize something, and you have the option of saying, "Oh, thank you for your feedback. I'll think about that," or you have the option of saying nothing and ignoring it, or you have the option of saying, "We don't listen to Nazis." It's like, don't pick that last one. That's that last one is just picking a fight, for no benefit. I gave this advice to some folks in tech, so completely outside of comics, but I think the advice applies everywhere. It applies to you too, you the listener, whatever field you're in. Don't pick fights that have no profit for you. And profit can mean cash. In fact, most of the time it should mean cash. But it could also just mean your own sanity, your own emotional well-being, whatever. If you can't gain from a fight, don't have the fight. Because otherwise, what are you doing? Nobody knows what you're doing. You're just screwing around. And I think this is where a lot of the responses I see from the company tends to be a lot more aggressive, a lot more fight picking. And there's no benefit to the company. There's actually only downside. The person you're picking a fight with is not going to be swayed by your argument and say, you know what, that aggressive response you gave to me makes me rethink your comics and I'll start buying them now. That's not going to happen. And the legion of just silent watchers are going to view you as an immature jerk, like maybe the person you're talking to. Suddenly you're at the same level in a lot of people's minds. But that's, I think, why Marvel, I think, again, a lot of little factors of why Marvel takes the heat for this stuff more than DC. But I think the biggest factor in all this is simply just, Marvel doesn't have restraint with these storylines, and they don't plan them out well, and so you get this shotgun approach to a lot of the stuff that makes it seem and feel bigger than it is, and in some cases more offensive than it is. And especially long-term fans, it feels like, people who've been collecting for a long time have a history and a legacy with your company. And so when you start pulling the rug out from under them all over the place, they're going to be salty about it. That's not that's not surprising, and you can't blame them for that. And I think if you tell the fans, you tell your readers, your customers, hey, we've always delivered for you in the past. You should bear with us. You can ask that. It's a fine ask, but you may not get what you want. In fact, you build up credibility so you can make these asks from people from time to time. But eventually you spend all that credibility, and then you just sound like a jerk asking people to trust you, trust you, trust you, while you continue to drive the car off the cliff. That's my perception anyway. Anyway, what about you? Do you notice this? Do you notice that Marvel gets more heat than DC? Do you think there's another factor in there? Somebody made the comment like, well, Marvel just has a much higher volume of this stuff. Well, sort of. They sort of do. They do marginally more than DC. But if you just put them head to head, if you like take this high level 30,000 foot view and look down on it, you'll notice, both are kind of making their own moves in different areas. It's just one is doing it much more in fits and starts. They do a bunch and then they rest, do a bunch and they rest, which I think is jarring. Whereas the other one seems to be a little bit more planned in how it rolls things out. That's my theory anyway. What's yours? Leave me a comment below. Would love to hear your ideas on the topic. Like and subscribe. There's buttons on the video. Go for it. It's easy to subscribe. It's a button away. And then you can be bothered at 7:30 a.m. Pacific every single day for a video. That's how it works, folks. Follow me on Twitter at Comic Perch. If you have questions, ask them there. I'll be happy to answer them, do videos about it. And thanks for listening.